In the glittering ballrooms of 1818 London, beauty was currency, and Lady Beatrice Ashworth was bankrupt. At 28, she was firmly on the shelf, a pale shadow beside her younger sisters. Lavinia had married the handsome Lord Pembroke, and Rosalind, the kind Lord Summerley. They were the diamonds of the family. Beatrice was the chaperone, the sensible one, the spinster. But when the most powerful, enigmatic, and ruthless man in England, Alistair Vane, the Duke of St. Jude, entered the marriage market, he didn't see the glittering diamonds. He saw the overlooked stone, and he was about to show the ton what true value really was. The crush at Devonshire House was suffocating, a riot of silk, scent, and societal expectation. Lady Beatrice Ashworth stood near a potted palm, the unofficial station for chaperones, wallflowers, and spinsters. At 28, she was firmly all three. She adjusted the sleeve of her gown, a sensible, dove-grey crepe that had seen 2 seasons too many. It was a serviceable colour, designed not to offend, nor, consequently, to attract. Across the ballroom, her sisters held court. Lavinia, now Lady Pembroke, was a vision in emerald satin, her laughter tinkling as a circle of admirers hung on her every word. Rosalind, Lady Summerley, softer and sweeter in pale rose, leaned on her new husband's arm, the very picture of youthful marital bliss. They had done their duty. They had secured their lords. "Beatrice, darling, do try to look pleasant," her mother, Lady Ashworth, hissed, fanning herself with agitated snaps. "One never knows who is watching. Lord Grimsby lost his wife last winter. He's only 60. Beatrice resisted the urge to point out that Lord Grimsby also possessed a set of teeth that looked like a row of shipwrecked tombstones. "Yes, Mamma." Her gaze drifted. She wasn't bitter. Not truly, resigned perhaps. She had always known her place. Lavinia had the beauty, Rosalind the charm. Beatrice had the ledgers. While her sisters had practiced their watercolours and pianoforte, Beatrice had quietly learned how to manage their father's failing estate, how to placate tenants, and how to make £5 stretch into 10. It was a skill set entirely useless in a Mayfair ballroom. A shift in the room's atmosphere, a sudden collective inhalation, announced his arrival. Alistair Vane, the Duke of St. Jude. The whispers followed him like a physical wake. He was not merely wealthy, he was a power unto himself. His lands in the north were vast, his investments in shipping and the new canals legendary. He held the debts of a dozen minor lords, and possessed the ear of the Prince Regent, dark-haired, impossibly tall, and with eyes the colour of a winter sea. He was the most sought-after prize in England. He was also 35, unmarried, and had a reputation for chilling silence and brutal pragmatism. He had, it was rumoured, destroyed the career of Sir Robert Peel's cousin over a poorly negotiated barley contract. He moved through the crowd, and it parted for him. Matchmaking mammas pushed their daughters forward, only to have them wilt under his brief, dismissive gaze. He bowed curtly to his hostess, took a single glass of brandy, and retreated to the alcove near the string quartet, his expression unreadable. "He looks," Lavinia whispered, gliding over to Beatrice for a momentary respite, as if he is calculating the exact cost of the chandeliers and finding them wanting. "He likely is," Beatrice murmured. "I believe his family funded the crystal importation." Lavinia giggled. Then her eyes sharpened, turning from the Duke to her sister. "Oh, Beatrice, that grey! You must let me send my modiste to you. It is simply tragic." Before Beatrice could reply, Lord Pembroke reclaimed his wife, sweeping her back into the light. Beatrice sighed, turning her attention back to her mother, who was now complaining of a migraine. As she was fetching a glass of water, a clumsy footman, overburdened with a tray of ices from Gunter's, tripped. The tray flew. Ladies shrieked and leaped back. A glob of pink raspberry ice landed squarely on the satin-covered bosom of the imperious Lady Cowper, the most formidable of Almac's patronesses. There was a moment of horrified silence. Lady Cowper's face turned a shade of puce that clashed violently with the ice. While others gaped, Beatrice moved. She handed her water to Lady Cowper. "Drink, my lady." The shock. She simultaneously grabbed a clean napkin from a nearby table, and with a swift, practical hand, scooped the melting ice from the expensive gown. "Matilda," she said to Lady Cowper's daughter, "fetch your mother's wrap. The dampness will chill her." She managed the crisis with the quiet efficiency of a field marshal, diffusing the tension, murmuring apologies on the footman's behalf, and steering Lady Cowper toward the retiring room. It was over in 30 seconds. As she turned back, her duty done, she found her path blocked. The Duke of St. Jude stood before her. He hadn't moved from his alcove, but his gaze was fixed on her. It was the first time in her life a man had looked at her, really looked at her, in a ballroom. It was not a gaze of admiration, not of pity, and certainly not of desire. It was one of intense, calculating scrutiny, as if she were a column of figures he was summing in his head. He didn't speak. He merely inclined his head, a fractional movement, and then the moment was broken. A government whip hurried over, desperate for a word with the Duke, and Alistair Vane turned away. Beatrice retreated to her palm tree, her heart hammering for a reason she couldn't explain. She had been invisible to the ton for a decade, but she had the dreadful, thrilling, and terrifying feeling that she had just been seen. The next 3 days passed in a blur of mundane obligation. Beatrice reviewed the quarterly reports from Ashworth Park, discovering with a sinking heart that the wool profits were down by half. She placated her mother's nerves, and she endured a tea with her sisters where Lavinia detailed her plans for a new carriage, upholstered in French silk. "Pembroke insists," Lavinia had declared, "that I must have the best. A wife, he says, is a reflection of her husband's status." Beatrice, knowing Lord Pembroke's gambling debts were the talk of White's Club, merely nodded and poured more tea. On the 4th day, the card arrived. It was impossibly thick, cream-coloured, and bore a single embossed crest. The Ashworth's butler, a man prone to unflappability, almost dropped the silver salver upon which it rested. "His Grace, the Duke of St. Jude," the butler announced, his voice trembling. "He requests a private audience. With you, Lady Beatrice." Lady Ashworth fainted. When she was revived and the chaos subsided, Beatrice was ushered into the formal drawing room, the one reserved for guests of profound importance. She had changed, at her mother's frantic insistence, from her morning dress into the grey crepe from the ball. It was, after all, her best. The Duke of St. Jude was standing by the window, dwarfing the room. He was not dressed for a social call. He wore polished riding boots and a dark blue coat of such perfect tailoring, likely from Weston or Hobie, the best bootmakers in London, that it made every other man's attire look shabby. "Lady Beatrice," he said, skipping the pleasantries. His voice was a deep baritone, devoid of warmth. "Your Grace." She curtsied, her knees feeling strangely weak. "Please sit. I find societal ritual tedious." She sat on the edge of a chaise longue. He did not. He turned from the window and subjected her to the same intense scrutiny she had felt at the ball. "I will be direct," he said, his hands clasped behind his back. "I require a wife. My solicitors have urged the necessity of an heir for the continuation of the title and the protection of the estates. I have spent the last 2 months observing the offerings of the season. I find them universally lacking." Beatrice blinked, unsure if she was meant to respond. "They are trained," he continued, as if speaking of livestock at Tattersall's, "to sing, to faint, and to spend money. They possess no practicality, no discretion, and no sense." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "At the ball at Devonshire House, I observed you. You did not gossip. You did not flirt. You did not panic when that oaf spilled the ices. You handled Lady Cowper, a woman who terrifies cabinet ministers, with quiet competence. You managed the situation. You were efficient." Beatrice's mouth was dry. "You are very observant, Your Grace." "I am. I also made inquiries. You are 28. You are unwed. You are, by all accounts, intelligent and have managed your father's estate accounts for 5 years, a fact your mother does all in her power to conceal. You are not given to hysterics or romantic notions." He took a step closer. "I am offering you the position of Duchess of St. Jude." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. This was not a proposal. It was a job offer. "I offer you Vane Court, a staff of 100, and a personal allowance that will eclipse your family's entire annual income. You will have status, security, and access to the highest echelons of society. In return, I require your discretion, your loyalty, and your assistance in managing my properties. You will host my dinners, manage my households, and, in due course, provide an heir. I will be a respectful husband, Lady Beatrice, but I will not offer you sentiment. My affections are not, and will not be, engaged. It will be a contract, but one I will honor to the letter." The silence in the room was absolute. Beatrice stared at him, seeing the raw, cold power of the man. He was offering her the world, wrapped in ice. Her sisters, with their handsome, charming lords, were trifles compared to this. The dukedom of St. Jude. Her mother would be delirious. Lavinia would be incandescent with jealousy. She would be safe. Her family would be safe. And she would be utterly, devastatingly miserable. She rose from the chaise. Her hands were steady. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it did not tremble. "Your Grace, I am sensible of the honor you do me. You have assessed my qualities as you would a racehorse, and I suppose I should be flattered by your valuation." A flicker of surprise in his cold eyes. "You are correct," she continued. "I am practical. I am not given to romantic notions, and it is for that precise reason that I must decline your most generous offer." The Duke's composure cracked. It was a hairline fracture, but it was there. He had anticipated tears, gratitude, even negotiation. He had not anticipated refusal. "Decline," he repeated, the word sounding foreign. "You offer me a cage, Your Grace, a very fine, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. You offer me the position of Duchess, but you demand I set aside the woman. You offer respect, but not partnership. You value my efficiency, but you mistake it for a lack of heart. I will not marry a man who views me as a household appliance, however valuable. I have managed my father's ledgers, yes. I have no desire to be entered into yours as a debit. Good day." She curtsied again, turned and walked out of the room, leaving the most powerful man in England, standing alone, utterly confounded. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. When Lady Ashworth learned of the refusal, her faint was replaced by a genuine, terrifying fit of hysterics. "You refused him. You, a 28-year-old spinster with no prospects, refused the Duke of St. Jude," she shrieked, clutching the smelling salts. "You have ruined us. You have ruined yourself." Lavinia and Rosalind arrived, summoned by an emergency note. Lavinia's reaction was one of pure, venomous disbelief. "Are you mad, Beatrice?" she demanded, pacing the drawing room. "Do you have any idea what you have done? He is the Duke. Pembroke himself bows to him. You could have been the highest-ranking woman in England, save the royal family. And you said no? Because he wasn't sentimental? You are a fool." Rosalind, ever the peacemaker, wrung her hands. "Oh, Beatrice, perhaps you were too hasty. They say he is a very fine man, if a trifle serious. Surely you could learn to be comfortable." "I am comfortable now," Beatrice said evenly, though her stomach was churning with dread. The true cost of her decision became clear that evening. Her father, Lord Ashworth, a man who had long since retreated into his study and his brandy, summoned her. "Beatrice," he began, his face pale and papery. He didn't look at her, focusing instead on the stack of papers on his desk. "Your mother informs me you declined an offer from St. Jude." "I did, Papa." He sighed, a rattling sound. I had hoped it would not come to this." He pushed a letter across the desk. It was from his solicitor. "The wool profits are gone. The harvest failed. Our creditors in London, having heard whispers of Pembroke's own troubles, are calling in their notes." He finally met her gaze. His eyes were defeated. "I am in debt, Beatrice. Deeply. The sum is staggering. St. Jude holds the mortgage on this house. He holds the notes for Ashworth Park." Beatrice felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "St. Jude? But how?" "He has been quietly buying my debts for the last year. I thought him a patient creditor. Now I see." He slumped in his chair. "He wasn't making an offer of marriage, my girl. He was finalizing a foreclosure. If you do not marry him, we lose everything. The house, the park, your sister's dowries, which I have yet to fully pay. We will be destitute." Beatrice stared at the letter, the black ink blurring. The Duke's cold pragmatism suddenly seemed monstrous. He hadn't just observed her, he had investigated her. He had found her family's weakest point and placed his thumb upon it. This wasn't a proposal, it was a checkmate. Her pride, her small, cherished victory, turned to ash in her mouth. She had refused to be a transaction, only to find she was already part of one. She spent the night staring sleeplessly at the ceiling. She could refuse him. She could maintain her independence, her integrity. And in doing so, she would cast her parents into poverty, ruin her sister's standing, and see her ancestral home sold for scraps. Her family would be shamed, broken, and scattered, all for her principles. The next morning, she penned a single note and had it delivered to the Duke's residence. 2 days later, he arrived. Not at the London townhouse, but at Ashworth Park, the family's crumbling country seat. Beatrice had retreated there, needing to see what she was fighting for. She found him not in the drawing room, but in the muddy home field, speaking with her father's steward, Mr. Henderson. The Duke had shed his fine London coat for a practical, durable riding jacket. When he saw her approaching, he dismissed the steward. "Lady Beatrice," he said. The air was cold, crisp. "You did not tell me you owned my father's debts," she said, her voice tight. "You did not ask," Alistair Vane replied, his expression unreadable. "It was a private business matter. My proposal was separate." "Was it?" she challenged, her anger rising. "Or was it the final turn of the screw? Did you enjoy knowing I had no choice?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than calculation in his eyes. It was a flicker of something. Regret. No, that was too sentimental. It was acknowledgement. "I did not know the full extent of his desperation until after my proposal," he said quietly. "My men of business are thorough. They informed me of the total acquisition of the Ashworth debt only yesterday. I came here to see the asset for myself. Ashworth Park, or me? A corner of his mouth almost lifted. Both. Henderson is incompetent. Your father's rotation of crops is archaic. He is bleeding the land dry. You've been trying to implement a 4-field system, haven't you? Henderson has been ignoring your notes. She was stunned. How did you know that? I read your ledgers, the ones you keep locked in your father's desk. Your handwriting is very precise. He had broken into her father's desk. The audacity was breathtaking. You are, she said, the most arrogant man I have ever met. I am the most practical, he countered. He gestured to the fields, the sagging fences, the depleted soil. This is your family's reality. Marry me, and I will not only erase the debt, I will invest. I will restore this land. Your father will live out his days in comfort. Your sister's dowries will be paid. Ashworth Park will be yours, to manage as you see fit. I will give you the power to fix what you have been struggling to mend. He stepped closer. You refused my first offer because it was a cage. I am now offering you a key. The terms of the marriage, however, remain the same. Respect, discretion, an heir. No sentiment. He looked at the old house, then back at her. But I will add one more term. I find your honesty bracing. In a world of sycophants, it is a rare commodity. I find, he said, as if the admission pained him, that I prefer your company to that of any other. Beatrice looked at the damp earth, at the home of her childhood. He was offering her a choice that was no choice at all, but he was also offering her work, purpose, the salvation of her home. I accept your terms, Your Grace, she said, the words tasting like metal. I will be your Duchess. Alistair, he said. My name is Alistair. If we are to be partners in this, you will use it. Alistair, she repeated. It felt cold on her tongue. He nodded. The business concluded. We will be married by special license, in 3 days. The wedding was a hurried, sterile affair at St. George's, Hanover Square, with only the immediate family present. Beatrice wore a travelling dress of deep blue. Lavinia cried, though Beatrice suspected the tears were more for the lack of a grand society wedding than for her sister's happiness. Lady Ashworth vibrated with a joy so profound it was almost grotesque. Alistair was polite, remote, and efficient. He spoke his vows in a clear, strong voice, as if ratifying a treaty. Then she was the Duchess of St. Jude. She was whisked away to Vane Court, his primary country seat, a sprawling stone monolith in the heart of Yorkshire. It was not a home. It was a statement of power. It rose from the moors like a fortress, its gardens precise, its halls cavernous and filled with the ghosts of Vane's past. The staff lined up to greet her, led by the housekeeper, Mrs. Croft. She was a woman who seemed carved from granite, her black dress severe, her eyes missing nothing. Your Grace, Mrs. Croft said, her curtsy shallow. We trust your journey was adequate. It was, thank you, Mrs. Croft, Beatrice replied, meeting the woman's cold gaze. Alistair spent precisely 1 hour with her, showing her the library. It is fully at your disposal, and the dining room. We entertain politicians here on Tuesdays. Then he informed her that he was required back in London to meet with the Home Secretary. You will manage here, he stated. It was not a question. Mrs. Croft runs the household. You will run Mrs. Croft. He left. Beatrice was alone in a house of 38 bedrooms, with a husband who was now a 2-day ride away. They had separate wings. The Duchess's wing was opulent, decorated in heavy dark brocades and furniture that hadn't been updated since the last queen. It was cold. Beatrice, however, was not one to sit idle. She had not married for sentiment. She had married for purpose. She requested the household ledgers. Mrs. Croft presented them with ill-disguised contempt. "His Grace has always found my accounting to be satisfactory, Your Grace." "I am sure he has," Beatrice said, mildly, opening the first book. For a week, Beatrice worked. She learned the rhythms of the house, the names of the staff, and the intricate, wasteful paths of its expenditures. The Duke, it seemed, was being systematically overcharged by every purveyor from York to London. The wine seller's accounts were a fantasy, and the amount spent on beeswax candles could have lit the whole of Westminster Abbey. Mrs. Croft bristled at every question. "This is how it has always been done, Your Grace. The Vane Standard." "The Vane Standard will now include thrift," Beatrice replied, striking a line through an order for French linens. Her sisters came to visit, arriving in Lavinia's ostentatious new carriage. "My goodness, Beatrice!" Lavinia exclaimed, sweeping into the grand saloon, her eyes darting everywhere. "It's vast. You must rattle around in here like a dried pea in a drum. And so dreadfully north. The air is practically agricultural." "I find it bracing," Beatrice said, ordering tea. "And the Duke? Pembroke says he is never seen in London. Does he simply leave you here to count the spoons?" "Alistair is busy with matters of state," Beatrice said evenly. "And yes, I have counted the spoons. We were missing 3. I found them." Rosalind looked around nervously. "It is very grand, Beatrice. But—" "Oh, Lavinia, be nice. She is a duchess." "Yes, she is," Lavinia said, a sharp, jealous edge to her voice. "She is the Duchess of St. Jude, and her husband is in London, while my Pembroke is never from my side." Beatrice knew full well Lord Pembroke was never from her side, because his creditors wouldn't let him out of their sight. The visit was a torment. Lavinia delighted in pointing out every flaw, the old-fashioned furniture, the dour staff, the chilling silence of the house. She was trying to tear down what she envied. "Well," Lavinia concluded as they left, "I am glad to see you. Settled, sister, even if it is in a mausoleum. Do try to purchase some new gowns. That blue is almost as grim as the grey." After they departed, Beatrice felt a profound weariness. She was the Duchess. She had power, she had security, and she was desperately, achingly lonely. That evening, seeking refuge from the oppressive silence of her own wing, she explored. The west wing of the house was kept dark, the furniture draped in holland covers. Alistair's apartments were there, but also something else. She found a corridor she had not seen before. At the end of it was a single, locked door. It was newer than the others, the brass handle polished, though the door itself was thick oak. A low sound came from within. A murmur, perhaps, or singing? A soft, mournful tune. Beatrice froze. She was certain Alistair was in London. She was equally certain Mrs. Croft had insisted this wing was unused and awaiting restoration. She knocked softly. The singing stopped. There was a scuffling sound, then silence. Beatrice pressed her ear to the wood. She heard a distinct, sharp whisper. "Hush, my lady. No one is there. Go back to sleep." It was Mrs. Croft's voice. A cold dread, heavier and darker than the Yorkshire moors, settled over Beatrice. Her husband was not just cold, he was secretive, and his house, her new home, was hiding something in the dark. Beatrice did not confront Mrs. Croft immediately. She was a strategist, and she knew a direct assault on the housekeeper would fail. Mrs. Croft held the loyalty of the staff, and more importantly, held a secret Beatrice did not yet understand. Instead, Beatrice retreated to the ledgers. If the house had a secret, the money would illuminate it. She spent 2 days cross-referencing the household accounts with the estate payroll. She found what she was looking for, a significant, recurring quarterly payment listed under Restoration Fund, West Wing. It was a vast sum, far too much for simple upkeep. The payments were authorised by Mrs. Croft and countersigned by the Duke's solicitor in London, a Mr. Finch. The funds were being sent to a small private bank in York, under a holding name. Alistair returned a week later, as unannounced as his departure. He found her in the library, surrounded by account books. "The candlelight suits you, Your Grace," he said from the doorway. Beatrice started, her pen scratching across the page. "Alistair, I did not hear you arrive." "Evidently." He walked to the desk, his gaze falling on the ledgers. "Finding discrepancies." "I am finding questions," she said, choosing her words with care. She would not accuse, not yet. "Mrs. Croft seems to have a broad interpretation of household expenses. Mrs. Croft has been in my family's service for 20 years. She is loyal." "Her loyalty appears to be very expensive," Beatrice murmured. She decided on a direct, if oblique, approach. "I was exploring the West Wing. There is a locked door at the end of the main corridor. I was unaware we had a guest." Alistair's face did not change, but the atmosphere in the room plummeted by 20 degrees. The silence that stretched between them was no longer cold. It was arctic. "The West Wing is private," he said, his voice flat. "Alistair, I am your wife. I am the Duchess of this house. If there is someone residing here, I have a right to know." "You have the rights I grant you," he retorted, the sudden venom in his voice shocking her. "That was our arrangement. You manage the house. You do not pry into my personal affairs." "A person living secretly in my own home is my affair. It is not." He turned, his back to her. "Leave it alone, Beatrice. It is not your concern." The cold finality in his voice hurt more than she would have anticipated. It was the sharp, metallic clang of a door slamming shut in her face. He was reminding her of her position. She was an employee, not a partner. Hurt and now angry, Beatrice pushed back. "Then what of this?" She slid a different piece of paper across the desk. It was a letter that had arrived that morning, redirected from London. "It is a report from one of your mill managers in Manchester," she said. "He reports a fire. Arson is suspected. This is the 3rd accident in 6 months. Your warehouses in Liverpool are reporting systematic theft, and your tenants in the south are claiming their rents are being collected twice. Someone is deliberately undermining your businesses, Alistair. Is that also not my concern?" He snatched the letter, his eyes scanning it, his jaw tight. "That is a business matter." "It is sabotage," she countered, "and it is costing you a fortune. Who is your enemy?" Alistair looked up from the letter, his eyes dark. "I have many rivals. Lord Pembroke, your brother-in-law, for one. He believes I am responsible for his financial ruin when his own gaming is to blame. There are others, men in Parliament who resent my influence." "It is not them," Beatrice said quietly. "And how would you know?" "Because the sabotage is too precise. The thefts in Liverpool are internal. They know the shipping manifests. The rent collector in the south is using vein-embossed stationery. The fire in Manchester was set by someone who knew the guard patrol schedule. This is not an external rival, Alistair. This is coming from inside your organization, perhaps even from inside this house." He stared at her, the cogs turning in his brilliant, pragmatic mind. He saw the logic. He saw the truth in her analysis. "Mrs. Croft," Beatrice whispered, the pieces clicking into place. "The Restoration Fund. The secret in the West Wing. She is bleeding you dry, Alistair." "But why? Is she blackmailing you?" Alistair's expression was terrible. He looked trapped. "Beatrice," he commanded. "Stop. You do not know what you are talking about. You will endanger—" "Who?" "The person behind the door." Before he could answer, the library doors burst open. It was Mrs. Croft, her usual iron composure shattered. Her face was pale, her hands twisting in her apron. "Your Grace," she gasped, looking only at the Duke. "You must come. She is agitated. I cannot calm her. She is calling for you. She is breaking things." Alistair swore, a low, vicious oath. He looked at Beatrice, his eyes filled with a desperate, hunted look she had never seen. "Stay here," he ordered. But Beatrice was already on her feet. "No!" She pushed past the stunned housekeeper and ran toward the west wing, Alistair on her heels. The sound of screaming, a high, tragic wail, was now audible, followed by the crash of porcelain. Alistair grabbed her arm. "Beatrice, you cannot! It is not safe!" "I am the Duchess of this house," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "And I will not be locked out." She reached the door. It was unlocked. She threw it open, and the secret of Vane Court was finally, terribly, revealed. The room was a drawing room, once beautiful, now destroyed. A delicate chair was overturned, a vase lay in shards, and in the center of the room, crouched by the fireplace, was a woman. She was young, perhaps 25, and exquisitely beautiful, with the same dark hair and piercing blue eyes as the Duke. She was wearing a fine lace dressing gown, but her hair was wild and unbound, her feet bare. She was sobbing, clutching a miniature portrait in her hand. "He promised," the woman wept, rocking back and forth. "He promised he would never leave me. He promised." "My lady, Seraphina, please," Mrs. Croft pleaded, trying to approach her. The woman, Seraphina, scrambled away. "No, you lie! You all lie! He left me! He brought her here!" Beatrice stood in the doorway, her blood running cold. She looked at the woman, then at Alistair, who stood beside her, his face a mask of agony. It was so obvious, the resemblance, the pain, the Tun gossip. The Tun had whispered that the Duke of St. Jude was a widower, that his young wife had died tragically years ago, driving him into his cold, remote shell. Beatrice had assumed it was true, but the woman was not dead. She was here. "Your wife," Beatrice whispered, the word feeling like acid. She had been brought into this house, this marriage, as a replacement, a brood mare to provide the heir this poor, mad woman could not. Alistair turned to her, his expression shattering. "Beatrice, no, you don't understand." "She knows," Seraphina shrieked, seeing Beatrice. She pointed a trembling finger. "The usurper, the new wife. He's forgotten me. He's replaced me." "No, my darling, no," Alistair said, moving slowly into the room, his hands up as if calming a feral animal. "This is Lady Beatrice. She is a friend." "A friend?" Seraphina's grief turned instantly to rage. She snatched a heavy silver candlestick and hurled it. Alistair ducked. It shattered a mirror behind him. "Get her out!" Seraphina screamed. "I am the Duchess. I am his wife. Tell her, Alistair. Tell her who I am." This was the sabotage. This was the motive. Mrs. Croft, the loyal servant, protecting the true Duchess from the usurper. She had been stealing from Alistair, trying to ruin him, perhaps to drive him back to this house, to force him to abandon London and his new life and return to the woman he had hidden away. "Mrs. Croft," Beatrice said, her voice shaking but gaining strength, "you have been stealing from the Duke. You set the fire at the mill." Mrs. Croft drew herself up. "I did what I had to do. For her. For the rightful Duchess. He abandoned her. He left her in this room, in the dark, while he went to London to find that." She sneered at Beatrice. He needed to be reminded of his duty. My duty? Alistair's voice was a low growl of pure fury. My duty was to protect her, to keep her safe from the world, from the asylums, from the vultures who would have had her declared mad and stripped us of everything. My duty was to you, Serafina. He reached his sister, and Beatrice's world stopped. Sister, not wife. Serafina Vane, not Serafina, Duchess of St. Jude. The gossip of the ton was wrong. They had seen a beautiful young woman, the Duke's constant companion. They had seen him shield her, protect her. And when she suddenly vanished from society 5 years ago, they assumed she had been his wife, and she had died. He was so private, so powerful, that no one dared question him. He let the rumour stand. It was easier than the truth. Alistair, Serafina sobbed, collapsing against him as he knelt and gathered her into his arms. They said you had a new wife. They said you had forgotten me. Never, he whispered, his voice thick with a grief so profound it stole Beatrice's breath. He rocked her gently. I would never forget you. I am here. Beatrice watched, her heart breaking, not for her own pride, but for the tragedy in front of her. This was the Duke's secret. This was the source of his coldness, his pragmatism, his inability to trust. He wasn't a widower mourning a wife. He was a brother protecting the only family he had left. Mrs. Croft, seeing her charge finally calm in the Duke's arms, deflated. The rage left her, leaving only a haggard, desperate loyalty. She was his mother's nurse, Alistair said, his voice ragged, not looking at Beatrice. When my parents died, she stayed for Serafina. She loves her. She has also committed treason against your estate, Beatrice said, her voice soft but firm. I only wanted to protect my lady, Mrs. Croft whispered, tears tracking down her granite face. I thought you marrying. It would be the end for her. That you would lock her away. You will be dealt with, Alistair said, his voice hardening again as he held his sleeping sister. Wait, Beatrice said. She stepped fully into the room, past the broken furniture. She looked at Mrs. Croft, and then at Serafina. She had handled Lady Cowper. She could handle this. Mrs. Croft, Beatrice said, her voice taking on the quiet authority she had used at Ashworth Park. Go to the kitchen. Prepare a broth and a pot of chamomile tea with honey. Bring it to my sitting room. Not here. This room is a prison. Mrs. Croft stared, baffled. Then, Beatrice continued, go to your room and pack. You will not be going to prison. You will be accompanying Lady Serafina. I will arrange for a house by the sea, in Devon. A place with light and air and gardens. You will have a new staff, chosen by me, and you will have the finest doctors, paid for by the Duke. You will care for her, Mrs. Croft. But you will never, ever manage a ledger again. Do you understand me? Mrs. Croft could only nod, weeping in gratitude. Beatrice turned to Alistair, who was still kneeling, cradling his sister. He looked up at her, his winter sea eyes filled with a raw, terrifying vulnerability. He had let her see his one, crushing weakness. Beatrice knelt in front of him, among the broken glass. She didn't say anything. She simply reached out and placed her hand over his, which was gripping Serafina's. He didn't pull away. He held his sister, and he let his wife hold him. The next month was one of quiet, revolutionary change. Beatrice, with Alistair's full, stunned and silent backing, took control. She arranged the seaside villa near Torquay. She interviewed doctors from London, settling on a progressive man who spoke of moral treatment and restorative air rather than asylums. She personally oversaw the packing of Seraphina's belongings, adding new books, a pianoforte, and several bolts of bright, cheerful fabric. Mrs. Croft, humbled and grateful, worked with Beatrice, following her every instruction. The sabotage stopped. The accounts were put in perfect order. Alistair was a shadow. He worked, but he watched. He watched Beatrice move through his fortress of a home, not with the coldness of a housekeeper, but with the compassion of a true mistress. She brought in flowers. She aired out the dusty rooms. She replaced the heavy, oppressive brocades with lighter silks. She was bringing Vane Court back to life. The day Seraphina was to leave, Alistair stood by the carriage, his face pale. "I should go with her," he said, his voice rough. "No," Beatrice said softly, standing beside him. "You must let her go, and you must stay. She needs a physician, Alistair. You need a life. You have protected her for years. Now let me protect you." He looked at her, truly looked at her, as if for the first time. He saw not the plain spinster, not the efficient accountant, but the woman who had faced his deepest secret and had not flinched, had not judged, but had simply managed. Seraphina, calmer than Beatrice had ever seen her, came down the steps, leaning on Mrs. Croft. She paused in front of Beatrice. "You are not the usurper," Seraphina said, her eyes lucid. "You are kind. I hope you find peace by the sea, Lady Seraphina," Beatrice replied. Seraphina smiled, a flash of the Vane brilliance. "Thank you." She then turned to her brother and hugged him tightly. "Do not be so sad, Alistair. The house is warmer now." They watched the carriage rumble away, down the long drive, until it was gone. Alistair and Beatrice stood in the entrance hall, the silence between them no longer cold, but heavy with unspoken words. She was not ill, at first," Alistair said, staring at the empty drive. "She was the diamond of her first season, but the pressure, the Vane name, it broke something in her. When I refused to let her marry a fortune hunter, she retreated into her mind. I hid her. I let the world think she was my dead wife. It was easier than admitting the Vane line was fragile." "It is not fragile," Beatrice said, turning to him. "It is strong. You are strong. You bore this all alone." "Not any more," he whispered. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. It was the first time he had touched her with anything other than polite necessity. "Beatrice, my contract. It was unconscionable. It was practical," she replied, "and it is fulfilled. Ashworth Park is safe. My family is secure. But you are not," he said, his voice full of a new, raw emotion. "You are trapped here, with a man who treated you like a commodity." "I am the Duchess of St. Jude," she said. "I am where I am supposed to be." "No," he shook his head. "I offered you everything but sentiment. And I find I have nothing but sentiment for you. Your strength, your compassion, your brilliant, brilliant mind. You saved her. You saved me." He turned away, walking into the grand saloon. Beatrice followed. "Alistair, I am releasing you from our bargain," he said, his back to her. "The debts are forgiven. Ashworth Park is yours. You may return there. You may have your freedom." Beatrice looked at the back of his proud, noble head. She saw the tension in his shoulders. He was offering her an escape, believing it was what she must surely want. "You are a fool, Your Grace," she said softly. He spun around. "You are the most intelligent, practical man in England," she said, walking toward him. "And you are, in this moment, a complete and utter fool. You think I want my freedom? You think I want to go back to being the invisible spinster, managing a minor estate? I I am offering you a choice." "Then I choose this," she said. "I choose vain court. I choose the work. I choose the arguments over ledgers and the debates over politics. And I choose the man who, for all his coldness, loves his sister more than his own life." He stared at her, hope warring with a lifetime of disbelief. "Beatrice, I cannot offer romantic words. I do not know how." "Then do not," she whispered. "Show me." 3 months later, the Duchess of St. Jude hosted the Vane Winter Ball. It was the most sought-after invitation of the year. The house was blazing with light, warm and alive. Beatrice stood at the top of the stairs, not in grey or blue, but in a gown of deep crimson velvet, the Vane colour, with diamonds at her throat that Alistair had insisted upon. Her sisters arrived, their eyes wide. "Beatrice," Rosalind gasped, you are beautiful." Lavinia was speechless. The house, the jewels, the power. It was overwhelming. She saw her husband, Lord Pembroke, near the card room, already looking desperate. Then she looked back at her sister. "Well," Lavinia managed, with a trace of her old acidity, "you seem to have adjusted to your position, sister. The Duke, however, still looks as if he's swallowing rocks." Beatrice smiled, unbothered. Alistair was indeed at the far end of the room, speaking with the minister. His face was, as usual, serious. But then he looked up. His eyes found Beatrice across the crowded room, and he smiled. It was a small smile, just for her, but it lit his face, transforming him. He excused himself and walked directly to her, ignoring the crowd that parted for him. He stopped at the foot of the stairs, looking up at his wife. Lavinia, watching, prepared a cutting remark about the Duke's coldness. But Alistair Vane, the most powerful, pragmatic, and feared man in England, did something that silenced the entire ballroom. He sank to one knee. He took his wife's hand, raised it to his lips, and spoke in a voice that carried through the sudden, breathless hush. "My Duchess," he said, his eyes fixed only on hers. "You came to me as a bargain, and you have become my entire world. You are my partner, my advisor, and my heart. I am in all things your most devoted servant." He knelt. For her. For the eldest spinster. Lavinia's jaw dropped. Rosalind burst into tears of joy, and Beatrice Ashworth, the Duchess of St. Jude, descended the stairs and placed her hand on her husband's shoulder. "Rise, Your Grace," she whispered, her voice full of a love as practical and powerful as his own. "We have tenants to greet." The last carriage rolled away from Vane Court just before 3 a.m. The great hall, which had blazed with light and music, fell into a contented silence. Beatrice stood by the grand staircase, one hand resting on the carved oak banister. She was tired, but her heart was full. She had seen Lavinia's face as she departed, a mask of stunned, almost pained envy. Rosalind, however, had hugged her, whispering, "You are happy, Beatrice. I have never seen you look so happy." "I am," Beatrice had whispered back, and was startled to find it was the absolute truth. She heard Alistair's footsteps behind her. He had dismissed the last of the servants. They were, for the first time, truly alone after such a public declaration. "You managed them all," he said, his voice quiet. "The politicians, the gossips, even your sisters." "Lavinia was," Beatrice said with a small smile, "wonderfully subdued. I believe she may have been rendered speechless for the first time in her life." Alistair came to stand beside her. The crimson velvet of her gown was dark in the dim light. The diamonds at her throat were small, cold fires. He did not touch her, but she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "What I did," he said, his voice hesitant. In the ballroom. It was not planned. It was impulsive. A most impractical display. It was, Beatrice agreed softly. And it was the talk of the ton. You will be in the gossip columns for a month. Let them talk. He turned to face her, his gaze intense. But it was not for them. It was for you. And it was the truth. He reached into the pocket of his waistcoat. He didn't pull out a jewel. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was the original copy of their marriage contract, the list of terms he had dictated in her father's drawing room. Beatrice hadn't even known he'd kept it. He walked to the fireplace, where the embers of a great log still glowed. He unfolded it, glanced at it one last time, and then dropped it into the flames. They watched the edges curl, the black ink of his precise, pragmatic terms turning to ash. The debt is gone, Beatrice, he said, turning back to her. All of it. The ledger is clear. Alistair, she said, her voice thick. When I offered you your freedom today, he confessed, it was the greatest gamble of my life, far more than any shipping venture. I was terrified you would take it. Beatrice closed the small distance between them. She looked up into his face, the face the world found so cold, and saw only the man who had knelt for her. I am a woman of business, Your Grace, she whispered, rising on her toes to place a hand on his cheek. And I know a good investment when I see one. I am investing in you, in us. The risk, he murmured, his own hand covering hers, is high. And the reward, she replied, is everything. He bent his head and kissed her. It was not the chaste, respectful kiss of their wedding day. It was a kiss of profound, desperate gratitude, of a loneliness so deep it had nearly consumed him, and of a love so new it was still finding its words. It was a promise. He lifted his head, his forehead resting against hers. My ledgers are balanced, he said. My estates are secure, but my heart, Beatrice, my heart is entirely in deficit to you. Good, Beatrice smiled, her arms sliding around his neck, finally, in her own home. Then you will spend the rest of your life paying me back, and that's the story of how the overlooked spinster proved that real value isn't in a pretty face or a youthful giggle. It's in the strength of character, a sharp mind, and a heart brave enough to see the man behind the title. Beatrice and Alistair's marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was something far better. It was a partnership built on respect, truth, and a love forged in the fires of a shared secret. They rebuilt an empire, raised an heir, and proved to all of London that the most powerful force in England wasn't the Duke's wealth, but the Duchess's wisdom. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were touched by Beatrice's journey from spinster to powerhouse, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of true strength, and be sure to subscribe for more dramas where the overlooked finally get the love and respect they deserve. We read every comment, so let us know what you thought of the Duke's final, stunning gesture.